See, here's the funny thing. That mirror is so good. That's my privacy, because it's like I can see who's walking up. So if I want to open the door for air, I can do that. Anyway, to the point. Yeah, one of the many absurd fake hipster child man phrases is stealth fanning. It's actually strange. Wrong. That's the wrong way of putting it. I have, for 30 years, I've never spent much time. No, I've basically not spent any time at all, even in towns of 1,000 people. Never mind, this one's got 20,000. But I've just been slightly trying to catch up on some digital. But here's the point. And this region, there's just no cheap shops around anywhere. You have to come into the town. Cheap shops, even affordable shops. But here's the point. Yeah, I was like, so in the last week, two things. Oh, it regularly happens. No, in the last 2 weeks. So firstly, I was kidnapped by some religious people. She was wonderful. No, they were both wonderful. But then I met a woman, their friend. They kidnapped me, took me to meet this woman. And she'd been living here many years. She, not a man. Man's not allowed to have opinions in this awful society. She said, and she's a really intelligent, impressive woman, actually. 70-ish. And she said, God, it's so unfriendly here. She'd brought up children here, I think. She'd been living here quite a few years. She said, like, it's poisonous, unfriendly, and a very, very together woman. In fact, I met her in a very posh hotel. And somebody else I met who we won't even refer to because you don't bother referring to immigrants. Why do I say that? Because I only like immigrants. Because poor immigrants who come to Britain, they never speak the truth. Somebody spoke the truth to me once. Ralph, Britain should be in the queue for The Hague before us. Yeah, but they're terrified of the truth, the immigrants. Because I suppose at the end of the day, the immigrants that come here, and it's a semi-free world, they're the most, they need the bling that they perceive Britain to be full of, when it's full of so much more bleakness than anywhere else I've ever spent time in Europe, and I've spent time in Europe in poor places. Bleakness of the soul. Anyway, so she said, I mean, I actually made a long, great big rambling audio yesterday, and I've got to get to the point. She said, my gosh, quick, shit creek. Somebody's realised it's just full of hate. So I'm going to call it Hatesville. Anyway, it's absolutely relevant. But the one thing, this is the one great paradox of my last nearly 2 years. And long ago, the only reason I came here was to stepping stone to get into Europe with somebody else, maybe. Anyway, to the point. 25 years ago, had I arrived in this society is mainly Sybarite, younger incomers. I didn't know so many of them were here. They're Sybarites, you know, bless them, poor things, they're deluded. You have to listen to my long audio. But 25 years ago, if I'd ever spent long enough here to see the reality, I would have said, it's actually really interesting. It's like 25 years ago, I was walking up the street in Hay-on-Wye thinking to myself, God, this place is the dullest place in the universe. Plus, there's a preciousness coming in. But here it's different because underneath you have so many who perform this charmy sweetness and whatever. But underneath, they are bleak. And most of them have earned their money by being really seriously... I bet you there's so many. Herefordshire, you used to have a small percentage, but significant, and you would encounter them sometimes, of retired SAS. In other words, murderers. British state-employed murderers. And because Craden Hill was, Craden Hill's next to Hereford. But they would be dotted around. You'd encounter them it was not pleasant encountering them. Meaning, if you went in the old days when I used to go to the pub for a pint occasionally, there'd be one or two of these blokes there in the kind of nicer place, because I suppose they have good pensions, even though they should be fucking well working. But 40-year-olds who've been pensioned off, just drinking themselves to death, and they really were pretty psycho. You really registered. But here, I bet you there's so many more ex-forces, retired, and they're all bored. They're all performing whatever via the all the vehicles here are customized. I've never seen so many customized vehicles in my life. But it's so deep underneath. It's such a sour place. So I would have found that interesting 25 years ago. I thought that Cornwall was mainly bucket and spade tourism. No, it's a different thing altogether. But now, it's the most if it were 25 years ago, I'd be like writing a great big travelogue and collecting and I have collected and diarised everything. It's just something I do on behalf for the next generation. But here, now, it is so. I've never encountered a place that is so falsely. It's destabilised by a complete illusion as to what it is, and it's the incomer, non-ex-military fascist pretend bohemians. They destabilise it more than anything else. Well, they're centre of the universe. Shit Creek, as she said. It's so full of hate. Yeah, but that's the real thing. It is Animal Farm. This is, I always forget the Golding. Lord of the Flies merged with Animal Farm, and so few will talk. It's just the same as the Marches. They've bought into this fantasy, so they won't talk the truth, because the truth is, I was suckered into this fantasy 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and so because I bought into it, I spent my money to move down here and buy somewhere overpriced. So it's like, I can't tell the truth, because that would shatter their fragile little egos. Because all of these people, they're all ex-townies, and it's so horrible. And I'm allowed to say that because proper ex-Warlites are a minority and so fucking oppressed. So I'm allowed to insult everybody. The ex-townie is so, behind their smile, they're fragile egos, and they're so desperate. That's why they've all got to express themselves via. Everybody wears different clothing. Everybody has a different vehicle. It's like, I got to express myself. And everybody wants to be sort of seen to be doing a different kind of yoga. I had no idea there were so many kinds of yoga and so many kinds of other nonsense fucking bullshit things, when there's wood that needs chopping, there's blah 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 blah. Well, you shouldn't really even clear the brambles. You should leave everything for nature. But there's stuff that needs doing with your arms, or garden or land that needs organically using to grow some vegetables. No. That's a point. Do you know, I hadn't thought about that. What you don't see is so much more interesting. Because I wonder. You very rarely see any allotments. How interesting. Anyway, I've zero interest. Except onward. Right, Action Stations now. He's been parked there 2 months.